Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Let's Talk. We're talking about Islamophobia this evening. As you know, a week ago, Monday or Tuesday, I can't remember the exact date, in the Parliament there was a launch of the Islamophobia definition. All-party parliamentary group, they met, they've been working for a year, and they've come up with a definition that would, for the first time, encompass the true essence and the meaning of Islamophobia. Islamophobia has been used by all people from all backgrounds for good and bad, for and against. And of course, lawyers, politicians, media pundits, they've all been debating whether it is appropriate to use this terminology, whether it actually says what is meant by the exact term. After lengthy discussions and debates, it has been felt by some people that there was no universal definition that combines everyone's thinking. So now we have, and if I was to read you that definition, it would be Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness and perceived Muslimness. That was the all-party parliamentary group's definition after a year or so of work across the board with various stakeholders. There was a report launched. I was there myself. I saw it. I heard various speakers speak about it. So we want to talk about this evening. I want to hear from you, your definition of Islamophobia, your experience. Have you experienced Islamophobia firsthand? There are some people who deny Islamophobia to even exist. They say, oh no, that's just a made-up story. It's an excuse to curtail freedom of speech. Their freedom to criticize Islam is what they're accusing Muslims of trying to curtail. Some are completely denying, saying it's a fictitious idea. Muslims are just making it up. I want to know about this. I want to know about your experience. Have you ever experienced Islamophobia? And of course, I've got very eminent guests here, and I will be discussing this with them. Let me introduce them to you. On my left, Muhammad Tasneem Akunji, a terrorism lawyer, and recently come to more prominence since he has issued a letter to sue Tommy Robinson. Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
You and your colleague, actually, Farouk Bajwa.
That's correct. Yeah.
That you are both suing Tommy, whatever name his real name is, Robinson.
Yeah, Stephen Yaxley Lennon is his given name. But we're at the firm, we're suing him on behalf of our client, who's Jamal.
Of course, we will talk about that, inshallah, in a minute. We then have Masood Ahmed, let me go from my left. We have Tahir Butt, former executive of the the Association of Muslim Police and the Muslim Safety Forum. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
Very good. Welcome to our program.
Thank you.
And we have also been joined by Masood Ahmed, Assistant Secretary General for the Muslim Council of Britain. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Walaikum assalam.
How are you doing?
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Very good. Excellent. So we are all here. Let's start with the police officer, or former police officer. Are you still a police officer?
Police staff, computer forensic examiner.
Okay, well, still part of the establishment. What do you make of this definition? Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness.
I think in terms of the definition, it's taken us a long time to actually get here. So the definition is one for the lawyers to interpret and to create, but more importantly for me, it's what we actually do with the definition and what change we can bring about because of the work we've done.
Okay, so you are okay. You're welcoming the definition.
I think it's
as a starting point.
It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing at the moment.
Okay, so as a lawyer, Tasneem Akunji, how do you look at it? You are a lawyer at the forefront of Islamophobia and the recent attack on that young boy, Syrian boy, in Huddersfield. Am I right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's hear your view. What do you think of the definition?
Well, I think it's a working model. Yeah. And like most things in law, you start with a definition that's quite rough and ready on the edges, and then you have arguments around it and debates around it, and you'll create a body of case law that then refine it. So you can never get a definition that's going to be pitch perfect from the off. That's I don't believe that's ever happened in law in any sphere. But as time will go by, then this definition will be tested and crafted.
So currently you're quite comfortable as a starting point on this definition itself.
Well, I mean, really, the reason it sort of comes about is that we have the Racial Relations Act, which was brought into place to stop general racism, and that seemed to be working in terms of criminalising that type of behaviour by making existing offences more aggravated in nature, and that really had a sociological effect. It really damped down overt racism across the country. And then we have the war on terror narrative that comes up, and it created a special category, a little hole in that wall, so to speak, where people were given the permission to be racist as long as they called it Islamophobia. So as long as it was targeting Muslims and not race, then effectively the societal reaction to that was this is an acceptable form of racism. And what this definition does is it puts a cork back in that hole fairly well, and we'll have to look at how much leaks are left around it as of when those cases come up on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, well, thank you. So again, a welcome, but more work needs to be done on it. Let's talk to you, Brother Masood Ahmed. You are dealing with some of the cases through Muslim Council of Britain, I'm pretty certain. But you're also a grassroots activist. You have been and you've worked in the council, you've worked in all sectors. How do you look at this definition? Do you welcome this?
Well, as an individual, as well as through the Muslim Council of Britain, we have come across a huge range of discriminations, Islamophobic discriminations, and this definition certainly captures much of the experiences of individuals within Britain who have experienced all sorts of discrimination, but certainly what it seems like is that some of it is very much rooted in racism, but ultimately it is because of the perceived Muslimness of the individual. That's what comes across as prominent.
Let me ask you then, what is Muslimness? Because that's a very vague thing to say. What is Muslimness? Muslimness is not a race. Muslimness is not a nationality. It doesn't necessarily talk about the faith either. So what is Muslimness?
Yeah, well, it is to do with how the other perceives the Muslim community. So people have fears, people have distorted beliefs and ideas about what a Muslim is, and a lot of that drives them to discrimination, and some of it is to do with that perception, really. Muslims are not one particular homogeneous race, which is why...
But then it makes it even more difficult, because if you say a group of people are not very homogeneous, how would we then make it legally enforceable if one Muslim is different to another? It sounds like a very wishy-washy, woolly definition.
Well, some people would prefer it to be a lot more precise, but the difficulty is that what we are picking up and what we see through this research is that a lot of it is not different from racism. People have experienced racism, and this is it has a lot of commonality with other communities. So Muslims are not being singled out in that sense because their experiences are shared. However, when it comes to the attacks, they are being perceived to be a threat or whatever.
But it still doesn't answer that question, though. So I'm going to ask you, Tasneem, if you don't mind me asking you directly, what is this Muslimness? How do you define that?
Well, effectively, it's a catch-all term. It's something that's used to catch incidents where the fact of being a Muslim isn't in existence. So, for example, if you have a violent racist, they don't tend to be too well educated about the differences between brown people, but they tend to be motivated to attack Muslims.
That's why they've been attacking Sikhs, thinking they're Muslims.
Exactly that. So if an Islamophobe were to go and attack a Sikh thinking he's Muslim because he appears to be Muslim, then that actual definition without Muslimness wouldn't work to catch him. So you'd have to have the Muslimness catch-all to say, well, actually, his motivation around attacking this perceived phenotype of individual was the Muslimness that he perceived around it. So it's a term that doesn't exist because a non-Muslim or a Muslim is a defined thing, and what we're trying to create is a sort of a
vague thing in the middle.
Yeah, well, it's to accommodate for the stupid, really.
I like that. So fool-proof definition then. But I still am not sure how we'll be enforcing this across the board. If your Muslimness is different to Tasneem's Muslimness and his Muslimness is different to the rest, if any one of you complain about Islamophobia, how do you make that stick in the eyes of the law?
I think in terms of this definition, at the moment this isn't law. At the moment, this is the Muslim community coming together, funding this themselves, having prominent politicians come on board, and to define for ourselves in terms of what Islamophobia is. The issue is about what the brother said earlier on. It's about the significant increase in hate crime and discrimination. So my day job is I work in the Islamophobic response unit for an organisation called MEND. And we have experienced nationally, in terms of the Home Office statistics, almost a 400% increase in hate crime over the last 8 years.
Against Muslims?
So in terms of the total hate crime figure, there's a 100% increase in 8 years, but the significant increase is religious-related hate crime.
But not against Muslims alone?
So 52% of the 400% increase is Muslims. And the majority of those Muslims are women. So ultimately, this definition, if this can lead towards a reduction in hate crime, as I say, 400% is quite a significant increase.
So what do you say to the critiques who are saying, no, there is no Islamophobia, Muslims are just making it up?
It depends on who the critiques are. If we're
I'm talking about pundits in newspapers, Daily Mail, Evening Standard, Sun, Express. You want me to name it? I can. I know there is Ofcom rule to make sure I do a disclaimer, and disclaimer is there are other newspapers who don't. Okay. That's my disclaimer, right? However, it is true that these newspapers do very often come up with these kind of questions. I have even read on Sunday Times, Rod Little's article complaining that there is no Islamophobia.
So in terms of the right-wing media, in terms of the Daily Mail and these sort of individuals, to be honest, you can't rationalise them. But my concern is government people like Sarah Khan, for example, who has come out instantly and but criticised the definition. And for me, there is a hidden agenda here. The government, I was on the
When did she get the chance to talk about Islamophobia? When she was talking to the Emiratis about peace initiatives? I saw, wasn't she over there? Or she spoke from over there, I suppose.
I'm not sure about her.
But you just said she's the British government. I'm just thinking why she's over there.
I'm not sure why she is, but I think that for me, I was in the 2005 Preventing Extremism Together task force, and there was a distinct change in government policy at that time. That is the moment where Tony Blair, we had a whole heap of strands, and we spoke about foreign policy on every single one of those strands. Tony Blair decided it could be anything apart from foreign policy, and that's when he moved from mainstream Muslim organisations like the MCB. So there is a hidden agenda, in my opinion, in terms of where this is going. So when people like Sarah Khan are criticising this definition days into when it's been created, it's a concern for me, because ultimately we want government and institutions to adopt this definition and to bring about change.
There is a problem here. The problem is that the critiques of Islamophobia are being branded as one bunch of right-wingers. But you also have Muslims who are criticising them, or at least they're claiming to be Muslims. The problem I have is that those who are claiming to be Muslims, it's their Muslimness which is also included in the wider definition of Islamophobia. So if somebody's Muslimness, and as Muslims they're feeling they're not discriminated, you can scream all you like. You immediately create the no and yes dichotomy straight away.
But it's not about criticism of the definition, because there's people who were involved within the process itself who have criticised the outcome. What it is about, it's about individuals who are trying to muddy the water. So this, as I say again, this is a Muslim-funded initiative, the Muslim community coming together after several years to decide what their own definition in terms of Islamophobia is.
So do you think those Muslims who feel left out, such as Sarah Khan, are just crying foul?
I think Sarah Khan has a legitimate criticism as a member of the Muslim community, but the difference is she's a representative of the government in terms of the extremism czar.
Okay.
So that's the difference.
Let's talk to our new guest who has just arrived. Welcome to our programme, Saliha Khawar, is it correct?
Cover.
Okay, welcome to our programme.
Thank you.
You're from Gender Violence Advocate, Street shaked hands. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Very good. Welcome to our discussion. Today we're talking about Islamophobia. In your work, do you come across Islamophobia on a regular basis?
Because of my line of work involves gender violence, we don't come across it as much because people don't report it to us because they come to us for different reasons. But having said that, Islamophobia is a new recurring theme that we're having to get training on, because although it doesn't relate to domestic abuse, that sort of thing, but people are approaching us and saying, look, we've experienced this at work. Is it Islamophobia that we're experiencing? Because some of them don't know what it is. So some of them are just defining it as racial, or some of them are just defining it as, okay, maybe it is Islamophobia.
Well, the new definition is very clear. It says Islamophobia is rooted in racism. And it's a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness.
That definition, I believe, came out last week as a result
That's right.
of a 6-month study or something.
Yes.
But that hasn't been filtered down to the common people yet. They don't really know what it is. I think we need more work around that, so that
But there's going to be a workshop or a roadshow, I've been told. But in your work, you haven't yet directly come across it.
Not directly, no, because of the nature of our work.
What do you think of the definition then?
I think the new definition does help to bring the two separate definitions together. It does relate to a lot more people, because I think the first one, which was like, I think 22 years ago or 21 years ago,
Runnymede Trust's
that's it.
definition.
It was very, very basic, and it didn't really encompass everything that people are experiencing. And so I think the new definition, in my opinion, does cover a lot of stuff, and I think members of the community can relate to it, in my opinion.
Very good. Thank you. Let's take a call. Hello, Assalamu alaikum, caller.
Hello, walaikum salam.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm in the studio.
You are calling us in the studio.
Oh, okay.
You're live. So now we're talking about Islamophobia. What would you like to say?
I can't give you a definition for Islamophobia. I can give you some experience.
Please, I would love to hear your experience.
Experience every day on what I think is Islamophobia.
Tell me a bit more.
So what I experience every day, whether it's dropping the children off to school, picking them up, going shopping, is whether it be from the car next to me, very vile language. I mean, I wear niqab and burqa.
Okay.
So every day I do experience Islamophobia, and I don't report it because I can't be reporting it every day. And it is because of the way I'm dressed, and obviously I'm Muslim, and my appearance, I don't have to announce it. They just look at me and they know I'm Muslim.
Okay, I'm really sorry to hear that.
For me, this is Islamophobia on an everyday basis.
So you're saying to me when you're leaving your home to drop your kids off to school, when you're picking them up, when you're driving, just because they see you as a symbol of Muslim, they attack you based on your Muslimness?
Yeah, that's right. So it can be, I'm walking down my street where I live, and to be honest, because of this Islamophobia exists, and I live in a quite community where there is a lot of Muslims, but even then I'm quite scared. Over the years I've noticed it's getting worse and worse, especially for ladies.
Where do you live, if you don't mind me asking? Which area?
I live in Tower Hamlets.
Okay, in Tower Hamlets you're telling me that there are areas or pockets of areas where Islamophobia is getting worse.
And it's a lot more worse recently. I mean, even after 9/11, I've been in a niqab and burqa for years now. Even back when the 9/11 happened, it wasn't so bad. I have to say it's a lot worse now.
Can I ask you a question? Do you notice these with your neighbors, or do you notice this kind of behavior from strangers?
Neighbors, no. Not neighbors, ones that maybe don't know me, who don't say hi and bye to me, ones that don't talk to me, yes. But the ones that I do approach, or ones that have approached me, no, I don't receive it from them.
Okay. So let's exclude the neighbors then.
Yeah.
So you're experiencing this from neighbors. Strangers.
Neighbors as well. Stranger neighbors, yeah.
Stranger
ones that don't know me.
Okay. And would you say these have been verbal abuse towards you, or has there been a threat of physical abuse?
I haven't, alhamdulillah, I haven't received any physical abuse, but it's always verbal. So if you're going to, Tesco, it will be a man. He'll quickly bring his face next to you because he's walking in the opposite direction and shout something in your ears and walk off.
Right. And
it's a very childish act, but that is the most common one. People just shouting something in your face and then walking off.
And can I ask you a final question? I'm sorry to ask so many.
No, that's
In the
fine.
last 1 week, say for example, from last Monday to yesterday, another Monday, within that 1 week, if you wanted to give us an idea of how many incidents you've experienced.
From last Monday, so a week. In the week,
Yes.
I'd say it's become quite normal. It's almost every day or every other day. If not once, twice. And I'm not exaggerating.
But you see, sisters, like your experiences must be reported. If you don't report it, if you don't lodge it, then Islamophobia is not going to be eradicated. I first want to say thank you for that amazing call and being so brave to share with us your thoughts and your experiences. And secondly, from all of us, our dua for you. But the only empowering thing I can say is that you should report it. But I'm going to go to the lawyer first. What could this lady do legally?
I mean, it sounds like it's a public order offence, really, where somebody is harassing somebody or causing them threat. It could be classed as a common assault, really, because an assault, contrary to what most people believe, can be just a threat or perceived fear of violence rather than actual touching. So that would almost certainly constitute an assault. Maybe in a
But the police officers may not do anything because,
Well-
as far as they're concerned, they probably don't even know what Islamophobia means.
Well, I mean, that's probably not the case. I mean, whether or not it's Islamophobic, if somebody comes and threatens you, then it doesn't matter what the reasons are. It will still be logged as a crime. But
Nothing will be done about it. I've experienced verbal assaults from people driving past me. I've told the police, and police said, sorry, sir, we've got more important things to do.
well, there are 36,000 reported cases of fraud every week, and action fraud gets through 3,000 a month. So, welcome to the
The reality, real
yeah,
world, yes,
unfortunately.
yes.
But at least it gets logged, because that's quite important. When incidents get logged and they're differentiated in terms of racially motivated or not, that at least creates a sort of heat map of the UK where we can then start targeting particular resources, however rare they are, to those locations to start looking at the problems.
And I'm going to come back to you. You've been in the police force for 28 years. Am I
think
right?
The irony is I actually started at Limehouse Police Station in Tower Hamlets in the 90s. So you can imagine in the 90s, some of the older people here, what policing and community engagement was like. But over the years, I think things have changed. So hate crime, the two things that police officers didn't like to go to were domestic violence issues and hate crime issues. And because of the changes and the pressures people have put on the police, they have now systems in place. They're not perfect. There's still lots of things to be done. But Tower Hamlets, in terms of community diversity and in terms of how the area has changed, has been quite dramatic over the last 20 years. But the thing is, unless you report an incident, that individual who has transgressed has got away with it.
And I also suggest to this sister, maybe you want to experiment this if you can. Get yourself a small camera, put it on your clothes and record a week as you walk by people who try and threaten you, insult you, and then take this recording to the police station and say, here, the evidence is right in front of you. And if I was, obviously don't do it on their face because you could be yourself in trouble, but hide a camera. Today it's so easy. You can put a camera in a pen. So many things can be done, but it's important because when that young boy Jamal, who was assaulted in Huddersfield, or has been assaulted many times before, but when he was videoed and it was shared on the social media, the entire world came condemning it. But until it became a media sensation, shared by a video, nobody gave monkeys about his fate. And if it wasn't that video, probably he would be going to that school every day, and that boy would be getting away with Islamophobic attack on him and others. So this is very important for you to report it, and if you can record it, it's even better. Of course, I'll come back after the break to continue this conversation even more, talking about Islamophobia. I want to hear from you, your experiences, your thoughts and your solutions. So don't go too far away. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to our discussion on the Let's Talk program about Islamophobia. I wrote recently about Islamophobia, and I have had so many people sending me private messages, terrible remarks, abusive messages on Twitter, on Facebook, and all my social media saying, you go back to where you come from, you Islamophobia campaigners are just pretentious, you're trying to stifle debate, you don't want any criticism, go and prove it to me that Islamophobia exists. Well, in response I wrote this: when you get untrusted looks at your local supermarkets because you are brown wearing a beard or a headscarf or Arabic looking, when you get sly remarks on your walk in the local park because you speak a different language with your friend, or when your children are left by the side by other children while playing in the park because they appear Muslim, when you can see the discomfort in the faces of your neighbors when you come out wearing a headscarf, when your bus driver looks at you with suspicion because you are visibly Muslim, when your postman talks to you with contempt as he or she reads your Muslim sounding name, when you are called racist and disparaging name while negotiating parking space or driving on the road, when you are told you are not good enough for a job because of your foreign and Muslim sounding name, when the media reports glorify crooks and criminals with the name of your religion, when the politicians regurgitate hate mantra they hear from the vile fascists and racists because they are prostituting for votes, while political commentators, analysts and pundits shout from their TV, radio and newspaper soapbox, no Islamophobia, and when you are not accepted as an equal citizen in your own country, you definitely are experiencing Islamophobia. I wrote that and I didn't get any response from anyone after that, because they know this is happening. A sister just called to say she gets it every day. I may not get it every day physically, but collective experience is, it is every day. And that's the problem we have. Islamophobia is an everyday experience, and quicker we get to know this, the quicker we should be able to eradicate this problem. I'm coming to Masood now. So, as a Muslim Council of Britain, of course you are an umbrella body of 500 organizations or so, and you've also become the port of call for many Muslims who are in distress. What kind of numbers are we talking about when you get calls from organizations, mosques or individuals saying, I've just experienced Islamophobia?
Well, I think it's difficult to put specific numbers because it's an ongoing thing. But we certainly are an umbrella body of affiliates in excess of 500 organizations and institutions. And when we do come across these experiences, we try and collect them and try and bring them to the attention of politicians as well as community activists so that people can take notice of this and do something about it. Where possible, we collaborate with other organizations, like-minded organizations who are committed to challenging racism, any form of xenophobia, who are committed to challenging, of course, Islamophobia as well. So we always work collaboratively with other organizations.
But do you have any numbers? I just want to know, because a lot of people say Muslim Council of Britain is a fantastic body where we can go to for lots of things. Do people come to you? You may not be able to deal with this, and you may not have the setup to be able to manage all the phone calls. I just want to know if there is a deluge of numbers or phone calls or emails that you receive on a regular basis, people complaining simply.
We're not providing any services as such, but collectively what we know is that the figures that have just recently been released, they show that 52% of abuse experienced in terms of hate crime is belonging to the, targeted at the Muslim community. And our experience is no dissimilar to that.
I can give you some figures.
Yes, go, let's hear some figures.
So my day job after I retired from the Met is I work for the Islamophobic Response Unit in an organisation called MEND.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of our unit, we had 353 incidents over a year period. So the Home Office also produced national statistics. So in the last year, it was about 17,000 hate incidents. About
17,000 in 1 year.
In 1 year. And that's a 14% increase from last year. So we're looking at about 200 incidents a day. So those are general hate crime figures in terms of race. But if you drill those down to in terms of religion, as I said, it's a significant increase. We're looking at overall and nationally probably about 20 incidents a day, but this is something which hasn't been reported because those mechanisms of tagging of a crime have only kind of come in the last 10 years. But what we're seeing is a dramatic increase in the rate of reporting as well. And so kind of cases, I get all sorts of cases every day. So from people being driven at with cars, to mosques being kind of criminally damaged, to lots of discrimination cases. There was a young brother I was speaking to a few days ago who basically is a graduate in engineering, and he's been applying for a job, and mashallah he managed to get a job somewhere up north, and they accepted him, he got the job, he got a starting date, and then he questioned the HR manager, look, on Jummah, do you mind if I have 15 minutes extra for prayer? Because I have to go a little bit further out. And unfortunately, the job offer was taken away from him.
Straight away.
So
did you take any action against the company?
Currently, we're investigating it and we're supporting the brother. But it just...
Well, such company should be named and shamed. Forget about investigation as far as I'm concerned. There should be a website. That name of that company should be published as Islamophobic and let people know about it.
I think at the moment there's, as a lawyer, I'm sure would agree that you have to go through a process. So if there's an employment tribunal that we go through. But the point being is it's what impact that has on that individual.
Of course, and the society at large.
Exactly, and what impact it has on companies, because they won't get the best staff.
The other day, and this is for you, Soleha, the other day a sister said that she was just parking her car. Mm-hmm. And as she was reversing, a car pulled up next to her, lowered her window and said, "You terrorist, learn how to drive," and drove off. Mm-hmm. What had her driving got to do with terrorism? What had her reversing back into a space to park had anything to do with terrorism? Nobody knows. And yet, somebody from our country, Britain, mm-hmm. had the audacity, I don't want to say the word, but to say that to the sister.
Yeah.
I just want to get you to respond. I'll come to you in a minute. Yeah.
Unfortunately, these incidents are happening a lot. So I don't know if it's to do with has Brexit opened a can of racism and Islamophobia? Is that another factor, or is it just the recent,
Well, there are people who said now we've voted for Brexit. You can get rid of the Muslims.
They have said that, and people feel that it's a platform for them to be openly racist and Islamophobic towards people. I feel that Brexit does have a large part to play in it.
Brother Masood, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is where the definition is capturing some of that, because it is about the perceived Muslimness of an individual. And sadly, as we know, that sometimes even people who are not Muslim get targeted and they become victims of attacks and abuse.
We have a Sikh gentleman, some Hindu gentlemen, even other places of worship have been attacked because they consider them to be Muslims.
Absolutely. So we really, as a society, have to ask, what is all that about, and who's driving this kind of
Tell me who's
hatred?
Driving?
Well, I think collectively we all have a responsibility, but certainly it doesn't help if prominent people in society, whether they're politicians or media personalities, if they find it commonplace to criticize and to make jokes.
Let me make it easy for you.
Or to make statements.
Let me make it easy for you. This is what the former Conservative candidate for the London mayoral election said about Sadiq Khan, Mad Mullah Khan of Londonistan. And this is what Boris Johnson said recently, talking about our sisters, that they look like letterboxes and bank robbers. That's what you're talking about, right?
I'm certainly, these are not the only incidents, but this certainly was
very prominent
by a very,
one mayor of London and the other one wannabe mayor of London.
So it doesn't help, and it just normalizes abuse, disrespect, normalizes disregard for any kind of respect and acceptance of diversity.
I think Brother Masood is being very, very polite here. I'm going to come to the lawyer, not so that you can be impolite, but I just want to ask you a direct question. Sean Bailey, the current Conservative candidate for the 2020 London mayoral election, retweeted a post last year which had shared a picture of Mr. Khan, Sadiq Khan that is, and a racist caption which also branded Labour as anti-British. The Conservative Party made excuses for him, even though 100,000 of his followers had already seen that tweet. And this is a Conservative Party upcoming mayoral election candidate. Do you think there is an institutional problem here? Parties like Conservative Party, do they suffer from an endemic level of Islamophobia more than any other parties?
I mean, I'd say that may well be a mayoral candidate, but we have the ex-foreign minister who, Boris Johnson, as you say, really attacking Muslims quite directly. And I wouldn't actually say it's institutional as such, because when it comes to politicians, they really are just, heroin addicts for votes. And so they will tend to do whatever it takes to get through to what they believe the masses want to hear. And sometimes that's engineered. So we've seen through Thatcher's time, when the BNP were rising, you'd see that what was seen as centrist Tory politics would open up, it would become much more right-wing, and it would suck up the votes from the BNP, and there it would sit pretty. And today we have the EDL, which is now a fundamentally Islamophobic organisation. Its raison d'etre is to literally attack Muslims, or whatever they say, extreme Muslims, but that's a conflation. And you see that the Conservative Party then morphs itself and evolves to accommodate the gorging on those votes. And we saw that directly.
And also UKIP, not just EDL.
As well, absolutely. I think
Nigel Farage has resigned from UKIP today on LBC, live apparently. I'm not sure what good that does to the world, but nevertheless.
Well, I think Nigel Farage has many problems across different continents, really. So this is maybe the least of his concerns.
Yes, of course. Okay, so we have a problem. The problem is the politicians are not making it easy.
I think, I don't know if you guys read all of the report, the APPG report, but there were some interesting statistics on page 14.
Tell us.
And it's in terms of people that they basically do kind of surveys, and it's kind of a consensus of all the surveys. And some of the figures are quite disturbing. It was the number of people who admit to being prejudiced in the UK. And before I read it, I'd imagine maybe 5%, 10%. But the figure was actually in 2011, 37% people.
Prejudice towards Muslims?
Prejudice to people of other races, non-white. And there were statistics in terms of political parties as well. So within the Conservative Party, there were 33% who were polled who admitted to prejudice.
I'm not surprised there at all.
And in terms of the Labour Party, it was 18%, and the Liberal Democrats came somewhere in between. And they also did research in terms of Brexit voters and Tory voters as well, and those were higher figures as well. So I think there's something significant in terms of a disease of the heart in our society, but also it's some of us who are older remember the 70s, and we were physically fighting on the streets in terms of races. So at least we're not in that position, and now we're academically debating whether racism, Islamophobia exists or not.
Let me take a call in the meantime. Hello, Assalamu alaikum, caller. Assalamu alaikum, caller.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing?
I am, alhamdulillah, doing well.
Very good. Thank you for the call. What would you like to say about Islamophobia?
Well, first thing is you made a question first about Muslim and Muslimness.
Yes.
Let me see if I have understood everybody correctly. What I understood from the discussion and what I would like to contribute is Mu Islam, if you make two syllables in Muslim, and if you say Mu is the doing, and Islam is who is doing Islam. So rather than talking about Islam, if you do talk about doing about Islam, then we'll get to the real Muslimness. That would be my first contribution.
But one second. Let me just ask you further questions to that. So are you saying the more practicing Muslim you are,
yes,
the more Muslimness you can demonstrate?
That's what it is exactly.
But how do you apply that legally when Islamophobia is concerned?
Because I am going to make you an example in here.
Okay, go for it.
The example would be, if you go onto the street now,
yes,
nobody is going to call you are a typical Muslim mullah who is trying to impose Islam and Sharia law and Muslimness and correctness and how to go to heaven your way, rather than saying the British way.
Okay.
Because it's a clash of conflict of interest of majority and minority comes to play. And when the vote banks and politicians, what they always do, they find the easier target, the softer target, and the Muslim ladies, because they are visibly different than everybody else.
But can I ask you, hold on, you
Yeah,
didn't
sure.
complete your example. So you said if I went out, they would not be Islamophobic towards me.
Not really, because as soon as they would talk, you would talk back, and then what would happen is they would say, this person has made an effort to be like us.
So who would attract Islamophobic attack then? What are you saying?
What I am saying is the conflict of majority and minority. And the majority nowadays,
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't hear you now.
I couldn't hear you either.
So, majority
I'm sorry
nowadays
if
is
I'm
what?
going a bit out of track.
I didn't understand what you said at the end.
Okay, what I said is the main Islamophobic cause is in fact
A conflict between the majority and the minority.
That's what it is exactly.
I get that,
yeah.
but I'm saying that's obviously an obvious statement of fact.
Yes.
Muslims are minority and majority of them are non-Muslims. I get that.
Yes.
But what do you think is causing the majority to feel the way they do against the small minority?
because what they are saying is that these people are winning over other people and they don't want them to happen.
Okay, all right, thank you. I think what you probably are trying to say is that the majority think Islam is here to take over. Is that the feeling you're getting, Tasneem? Masood?
Yeah, I don't think I don't share that view because I don't think the majority of the country are against Muslims.
But 37% in this statistic is a shocking figure, and 36% is just at a generic level. But if you go down a bit further into specifics, the number gets higher. So you can't say majority or not.
There was another interesting stat. I think it said 39% of British people had little or no contact with Muslims as well.
Yeah, that may well be, but I think if we generalise, then we equally are liable to get into the wrong corner. Well, I think what we need to realise is that racists, bigots and people who are intolerant towards others or intolerant towards the otherness, if you like, they are not the majority. They are people who are misguided. They need...
But what are the majority? Why are they silent?
Well, I think,
Well, I think
if you follow Jamal's example, and you may be able to speak more on that, significant members of the community, significant numbers of people are coming forward, they're showing support, they're showing solidarity, and they're protesting.
But I
against
don't
this kind
buy
of
that for a
behaviour.
second, and I'll put it to you, Jamal. Sorry, Jamal's case to you, Tasneem. I don't want to call you Jamal, sorry. If majority were in favour of Jamal's plight, in the sense for him, they stood with him, then we have raised £150,000 on his account at the moment?
From
Yeah,
150,000.
there should be 55 million
Of
pounds
course.
in the account.
I mean, look, when somebody says, "Do you want to, here's my friend, he's an Australian," I naturally assume they drink Castlemaine Forex,
Yeah.
basically, because that's the advertising we've got. I don't know Australians. I haven't spent much time with them, and I haven't been to their country. So the only experience I have of it is an advert for a very cheap beer, really, and that's the assumption you get because you consume the media, and most of the people in this country have been consuming media as their main course of entertainment, either through television or nowadays really more through advertising. And what we've seen in terms of studies, the Cardiff study on reporting in just newspapers alone, is that Muslims get 10,000% more negative publicity than anyone else, and that's a ridiculous figure. It's every day bombarded. So if you're in a little village somewhere in Huddersfield, or pick another place, Glasgow or whatever, and you don't have the metropolitan experience, you're out there in the rural suburbs, and suddenly some family moves in. Well, what's your experience? How are you going to relate to them? The only relationship you have with them is terrorism, because that's what you've been fed. So when the message is, well, these people who look in this sort of way, they've moved into our area and they want to kill you, then obviously the reaction is going to be somewhat, is going to be on that basis. It's a narrative that's already established. So I don't think it's a big surprise that we have this sort of a
So you're blaming
response.
the media for the fanning of this particular mantra of hate. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'd say not quite. Media is a tool. All right, I blame shareholder worship for this, in that the media is a machine to make money, and it's because of that worship of that dividend at the end that they will latch onto anything.
So
to
I'll
make
give you a quick example. in North London, in Whiteman Road, where you would be familiar with, that mosque has a huge development going on behind it, right next to the railway station. Hundreds of flats are being sold. The developer, Fairway developers, have airbrushed the mosque from its publicity material when it took an aerial shot, in order for, I suppose, not to attract the attention of the buyers that there is a big mosque right next door to it. Sun newspaper has caught up on this, and suddenly Sun newspaper has become the champion for the Muslims, calling Fairway Homes Islamophobic. So they've been going around Tom Park Lane and asking people about it, and they've been reporting negatively about Muslim community's reaction to this tower block that's going up, this luxury home that is going up right next door to it. While the committee of the mosque were asked for a statement, and they gave a fantastic statement. They said, we have no problem with that. If they're trying to sell properties, we wish them well. We will always be their neighbours. As Muslims, we'll extend our warm hands, whether they want it or not. We're here for them. That was not reported by the Sun newspaper.
Well, you see, I mean, the selling of newspapers comes down to the creation of conflict and division, and actually our sort of Anglo-Saxon society is based upon the notion of equality of arms and conflict. So we respond to that. We have our courts based on that system, and our newspapers sell conflict. I mean, that's why you have these sort of shows where you have people shouting at each other. They're very cheap to produce, and you just watch a bunch of, not too intellectual people just slang it out, really. And those are the highest rating shows. They're the ones that attract the most amount of advertising.
That's probably why Sun sells so many copies across the country. Yeah. Daily Mail, Daily Fail, whatever you want to call it, do this the same. Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming up to our break time, but I do want to bring to your attention that we're talking about Islamophobia and its definition. But we don't want to discount your experiences. And if you are experiencing Islamophobia, I'd love to hear from you. If you want to talk to us here right now, sharing your thoughts and your feelings perhaps could help you and others, may give courage to others to do the same, to speak out, to report, to get it logged, to get it registered, in order for others to also be benefited from your initiative. So I would really encourage you to call us. We're here for another half an hour before we finish our show. Love to hear from you, your stories, your experiences, your thoughts, and perhaps some solutions as to how we can eradicate Islamophobia from our society. Without that, we really are not going to be successful. So really inviting you for your thoughts. I know you wanted to come in while Tasneem was talking.
I didn't really, but there was something I would say. I think in terms of the reasons behind it, I think the media and the public narrative is important, but I think it's deeper than that. And the deepness is in terms of us sitting around this table, people from Bangladesh, people from Pakistan, the Indian subcontinent. It's that colonial experience, and it's how it shaped Europe and Britain. And it's what that psyche is deep within inside in terms of feeling better than the other. And it's about how in societies we like to stick together in terms of our particular groupings. So I think racism and Islamophobia are really deep-seated, and the solutions are also in terms of that context.
Okay, well, let's take a break. When we come back after this break, we're going to look at the solutions that we could all take a stake in, make them ourselves, and try and work towards finding a definite solution to this menacing problem in our society. So don't go too far away. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last part of our program, we're talking about Islamophobia, its impact. Now we're looking at solutions, right? There has to be some solution. Otherwise, we can't go very far. We fought pitched battles in the East End of London when we were younger against the BNP, the National Front, and all the other racist thugs. And by the grace of God and thanks to our powerful solidarity of people of all backgrounds, we fought and we won. In the sense that there is no longer acceptable, there is no racism acceptable in this society. It's not fashionable. And yet Islamophobia still is. Around dinner table, people can say anything they like about Islam and the Muslims. In the bars and the pubs and bars, there could be jokes cracked, just like there used to be jokes about Irish people or black people. There are absolutely atrocious attitude from employers towards Muslims and Islam. Why is this still fashionable, and how can we eradicate that? We're going to look at that right now. But I know I wanted to come to you earlier on. Sohaila, there are some real questions that we need to ask. And I know you asked me earlier on, and is it the onus on us to report?
That's what I've not just report, but is it onus to us to prove that we're not terrorists, like as normal
Are you
members of the
saying
community?
the Islamophobic attack is because people are perceiving us to be terrorists?
That's what they think from the media narrative that we were discussing earlier. They've got stereotypes about us as a community. So my question is it really down to us to go and prove to people that, okay, we're not terrorists? Do we have to go out of the way and do that in order to counter this?
But what do you say to those people who would say that 90% of Muslims are not terrorists, but 90% of terrorists are Muslims?
That's not true.
That's what they would say.
Where are they getting these stats from? Because that's just not true.
Immediately they'll quote you on your face saying, well, look at the 9/11 attackers, they're all Muslims. Look at the July the 7th bombers, they were all terrorists.
Yeah, but then that's going back to the whole grooming issue. Then if we say that the majority of them are white, does that mean all groomers are white? It brings back that question. You can't really use that sort of statistic on us.
This is where the media
That's where the
reporting
media
also
distorts
comes
it.
in, which you were talking about earlier, about selectiveness and glorifying or emphasizing
It makes
things
headlines though, doesn't it? That's
out
why.
of proportion.
So I had an interesting discussion
that
with...
certainly makes things worse because it just reinforces the stereotype and the belief. And there is obviously a narrative that is developing and has been developing for a long time that Muslims fit into these pigeonholes of terrorism, of extremism, and this, that, and the other. You look for evidence to confirm that.
But what do you say to the Muslim experts who confirm, who say this repeatedly? For example, you don't have to go very far. You just have to listen to the radios nowadays, and there are Muslim presenters, Muslim guests who are speaking, and saying exactly the opposite of what you're saying. They're saying, yes, Muslims are responsible. Yes, the terrorists are from Muslims. In fact, Quran is the problem.
But who are they being funded by?
Well, I
That's
don't know.
another
You tell me.
question to look at, isn't it?
Yes.
The people. Sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I was just going to say the people you're referring to, people who do say these anti things, they're saying it because it's sensationalism. They've got their own brand to sell. So whatever's the flavour at the moment, that's what they're going to do. So they're not really representatives of us. We need to look at our representatives who can, give a better picture.
But the media is not going to come to your representative when it wants to have a salacious story.
No, but our representatives are in the media. So they have a duty to kind of address these issues because Muslims are everywhere. They're in every part of society. So whoever's in a particular position...
That's very scary. Muslims are everywhere. You just realised when you say that, you probably have more
I don't mean to sound like
Islamophobic
Big
attack.
Brother or anything, but what I mean is that we are an integral part of Britain.
Yeah.
We are part of the community. We are teachers, we are doctors, we are lawyers, we are, all that. That's what I meant by that comment. So whichever position we're in, it's our job to present that narrative as individuals and not look at someone else to do it for us. As individuals, we can do that narrative within our roles.
But in the media, that is not true. The most powerful positions within the media, the editors, the commissioners, the ones who are makers of programs or deciders of programs, are very few in terms of Muslims. Very few. 99% of them are not Muslims, and they don't necessarily would invite your preferred representative to a show where they're looking to create more viewership, more headlines, and increase their rating.
No.
I mean, in terms of this issue, the liars end up creating fatigue. So what we see nowadays is that in the past when you had 9/11 or 7/7, a terrorism trial was a very difficult thing to defend against. But then after a while, the nation heals and you get a bit more of a fair shout at these things.
So that's why Anjem Choudary got locked up.
Well, but also some of Anjem Choudhary's followers who were picked up in similar circumstances were not convicted. So it's a bit more of a fair shout. Now, what that is about is that basically the media have overhit us with, well, the whole nation with this idea of terrorism, and people just know, actually not everyone, yeah? If Muslims would majority terrorists, they want to kill us, then the doctors just simply stop working, the NHS would collapse, and we just poison your curries, really. And that's your national dish done and half your population gone, isn't it, really? It's a very simple thing.
I hope you're not saying that really on a live TV program.
No, that wasn't a half-baked plan.
Not plan,
from
no.
the shelf of general terrorism.
So does it also come down to us to challenge, like if we see a programme where you're referring to the media, you're saying that a lot of these people have their own narratives for...
I'll give you an example. Recently, Morgan Freeman launched a groundbreaking, Oscar-winning film called The God, or God himself. And he went in discovering God. So when he went to discover God from different religions, his journey to Christianity was to the Archbishop of Canterbury. Right? He went to the Sikh Guru Nanak, or the Guru, to understand about Sikhism. He went to the Jewish rabbi to understand about Judaism. It was all top and high-flying people who came onto the program. When it came to Islam, guess who was speaking on behalf of Muslims?
Was it you?
No.
Who was it?
Majid Nawaz.
I thought you were going to say that.
Yeah, but that's when the viewers and everyone, the consumers, come in, where you can use your power as a consumer and actually make a complaint.
No, but you don't know the story behind it. When I asked the producers of the program, why do we have such high-flying people who are authentic to their faith, representing their faith, and why do we have a charlatan presenting Islam?
What did they say?
The researcher said, the producer said, ask my researcher. I asked the researcher, well, I was looking for a Muslim and I didn't know any Muslim. I knew Majid's wife. I called her and she said, ask my husband.
So something as simple as that.
As simple as that. And Muslims are not there as researchers. Muslims are not there as editors. Muslims are not there as program makers.
But once they are viewing the finished product, that's when we can then step in and say, we don't like how you presented us and who you've used to present us. That's not us. And
well, I did. I made a big fuss and I left, but nothing changed.
Just you, but everyone needs to complain though, don't they?
But if I can say that certainly from our experience in the Muslim Council of Britain, even though it's done at a small scale, but we have been able to pick up on a number of stories, headline stories, where media, it would seem like deliberate misrepresentation of Islam and Muslims, and once we complained and challenged, a significant number of those were corrected.
You're talking about Miqdad's lone jihad, as I called it, and BBC reported it. One man was able to wage a war against all the misrepresentation and misquotation, which is fantastic. I know.
It's done a fantastic job. Now imagine
but Muslim Council of Britain didn't do this, so I don't think you should take claim for it. It was individually he did, and it's a comment to him, right?
No, I don't think that's fair.
Software for that as well.
Did you fund the software? Yeah. Okay, very good. But I want everyone to take claims on this amazing thing. Go for it.
Well, I think Miqdad would clearly say that he is part of Muslim Council of Britain, and he is doing that on behalf of or along with Muslim Council of Britain, and we certainly support what he's doing.
But that's the precise problem, that the Muslim communities don't know the powerful tool that you are just describing.
If you would allow me, let me just finish the point. The point is that if one individual can have that much influence and impact in terms of the media coverage and responding and so on, imagine if 1.5 million or 2 million people responded in that way. That would be significant.
Can I laugh at this? There is a program that Channel 4 did about Ramadan a few years ago, and Channel 4 asked for Muslim feedback on Ramadan program. It was a Ramadan program where Channel 4 had adhan at iftar and adhan at suhoor time.
Yes.
Guess what? 12 or 13,000 complaints they received within 3-4 days from those who did not like the adhan. 5 praises from Muslims saying thank you for doing it. I know you wanted to say something.
I think the media is important, and to be honest, it's just not the Muslim community. Before us, it was the Irish community and the Jewish community. The media has always been what it is, and that's structurally in terms of who owns the media and the structure of the media and how we regulate the medium. This is deeper. This is about democracy and how the government engages with its community, including the Muslim community.
But they will not engage with you. Mend is banned.
Exactly.
MCB was on the backlist for so long. I don't know how far MCB has mended its relationship. Forgive me for using the term. So What government engagement are you talking about?
So I joined MEND after the Channel 4 documentary, and the day I joined was when Tony Blair condemned us as an organisation. And the reason I joined is if I thought Tony Blair was condemning MEND, I need to join this organisation. And also in terms of the MCB, for me it is the umbrella organisation, and for the government to engage with the community, the Muslim community, they need to be speaking to the MCB and credible grassroots.
Are they talking to you anymore? Silence is all. So not really talking to you. Tasneem, sorry, I'll come back to you. Tasneem.
No, I'd like to say as well that, I mean, in terms of complaint procedures and form filling and getting through to the right people to make your complaint in an articulated fashion that's going to hit the right sort of notes with the person you're responding to, our communities aren't yet or haven't got on mass sophistication about that, basically. So there are smaller communities who exist in the UK who are very well crafted at getting a lot of their membership moving to have a greater impact, really. And within our communities, and it is communities, we don't have that sort of cohesion between, let's say, the Somali community or the Pakistani community or the Bengali community, for example, to get a message out across those ethnic communities, really, as they see themselves primarily, rather than as the Muslim community. So what makes me sad is that the government will talk about the Muslim community, but we will talk about the Bengali community or the Pakistani community and what have you. And despite the good work that the MCB has done to try and collect many organisations together, we're not operating and educating ourselves cohesively yet. And I think that we're getting to a population demographic where we may well do soon. And I think that's partly the reason why we see so many attacks on the Muslim community. We were quite easily divided in the past. Like little councils would build us a little Somali mosque here and a little Bengali mosque there and a little Brelvi one, and then some Ahmadis got a huge one. And that's what would keep them divided.
While I hear that, do you think then, I mean, this is just to bring you all to the end of our program, just to talk about solutions. Do you think that Muslim communities have a responsibility to deal with some of the lack of integration, lack of involvement, lack of interest? Or do you think there is no question about it? Muslims are fully integrated and therefore then they don't have any role or responsibility to take, starting with you?
I'm just thinking, how more can I get integrated? I've been in the Met Police for the last 28 years.
That's you, right? No, that's you. Let's talk about majority. Let's go to Luton.
Okay.
Let's go to Bradford. Let's go to Birmingham. Let's walk through those streets, and even let's walk through Tower Hamlets.
And let's walk through the streets of Upton Park, where I grew up. Okay, so we were the first Asian family in our street. Okay, and we suffered lots of racism and Islamophobia. Then another family moved in, and they went towards them. Now that street is predominantly Asian.
Yeah, so it would be difficult to find a white person there.
But it was about white flight. It wasn't about us wanting to stick together. The white people in that street decided we're going to move out further onto Essex.
That's what happens in Luton, though, doesn't it?
But why did they fly? I want to know. Is it because we made their life unbearable? I'll give you an example. In the market that I used to go to when I was younger, it used to have all types of items. Right? It used to have English, it's a Caribbean, Bengali, all types. The same market when I go to now, it's only Bengali items I see. Why would a white person stay?
Because they felt that the property prices were going to go down, and that's how they decided to go.
The pubs probably closed down as well. So, no pub, no white people. Really.
So you're not taking any responsibility for the Muslim community's failure to integrate and make this their home?
I would say it's difficult. It's much harder for one group of people who don't drink alcohol to integrate into a nation where alcohol is the most important social function.
But you don't have to have alcohol to integrate.
You don't. But, I mean, if we look at the demographics of, let's say, white working class people have the least integration into English society, the least. They're the least educated, they're the least socially mobile, and so when we talk about other people coming into the country, we should celebrate the fact that they're more integrated than the indigenous population.
So let's dissect that a bit more.
Sure.
If you are talking about white working class people who are not educated and who are least integrated, let's talk about Brick Lane, an example.
Sure.
Brick Lane now has seen a clear divide between the Asian Bengalis and the yuppies and the arties who have just moved in. Mm-hmm. In fact, there was a proposal for creating a parish council with a boundary that excludes the Bangladeshis and less well-off people and only include the white upper class £1.5 million worthy houses owned by artists and celebrities. here you have a very educated community deliberately excluding the Bangladeshis from the local area? Or is it the other way around, that Bangladeshis are driving this community up the wall by their behaviour, and therefore they feel nothing but the only way to survive is to exclude?
There's no such thing as human interaction without dynamics, so there's going to be something on both sides. Now, in terms of the yuppies, I would imagine that they're not really that interested in chewing a bit of pan with us and having a cup of cha. They have other pursuits.
But I'm glad you talked about pan. Would you tolerate?
No,
would
I
you
wouldn't.
tolerate
No
the
way.
man and woman who chews the pan and throws the residue on the street?
no.
Why would the yuppie tolerate it on his doorstep?
You're absolutely right, but also I don't want to see the half coked up beaten up person at the end of the night either, or a drunk person vomiting on the floor. So it's one type of detritus versus another type.
But they're saying the same thing.
Of course.
The yuppies are saying we're sick and tired of the drunkards urinating on our doorstep, vomiting, and the Asian communities making our streets dirty with their pan and the residue.
Well, at least we're equally responsible for that.
But Masood, I want to come to you. I know you're Muslim Council of Britain's hat, and therefore I'm going to not take a dig at you, but really ask you to maybe take the lion's share of this. There is a problem in our communities. While we complain and blame everybody else for Islamophobia, I personally believe that Muslims haven't done enough actually to challenge Islamophobia or represent Islam or their Muslimness in a more sophisticated way, in an educated way. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think, yes, ideally we would be in a far better position, a lot more confident, a lot more self-esteem within the community, within the Muslim community, regardless of which country they came from, whether they are indigenous or elsewhere. But unfortunately, the scenario that we see is that it's not a fair game. People are not getting all the opportunities, and people are not getting a fair share of those opportunities to be able to respond and contribute. So sometimes certain communities are neglected. They're not getting the opportunity, they're not getting the support they need to be able to make positive contributions. So that just feeds into the negative cycle. Muslim communities are no exception in that sense.
So what's the solution? How do we eradicate Islamophobia from this society? How do we make sure our society is safe for all?
I think ultimately we need to teach each one of us, all of us, people in our community, to understand that we are human beings. We all have a shared commonality, and we need to work for the common good, which is one of our slogan. That rather than trying to think one is superior than the other, because a lot of that goes back to that sense of bigotry, that sense of superiority. And we know that in Islam, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, he said that there is no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab, and there is no superiority of a black over white or white over black. So that was dealt with some 1400 years ago. If we can understand that better, and if we can work together as a community with people who have a shared interest, then we'll realize that regardless of your ethnic origin, regardless of your religious persuasion, you will still be able to coexist and respect each other, love each other, care for each other. That's what we need to work on.
But it's a strange way, of course, Muslims are doing this or wanting to do this, and yet demonstrating something very different in their own internal behavior. We still have more than 60% of British mosques not allowing our sisters to pray. Why wouldn't the non-Muslims feel uncomfortable with such an alien bunch of people who are claiming to be so good with their religiosity, have so many mosques, and exclude more than 50% of their women from praying in 60% of British mosques?
One of our initiative in the...
I know there was an initiative, but I don't think I don't think it's having an impact on those mosques where the doors are closed.
I can tell you that it's having a very positive impact on a great number of mosques than it ever was doing. For example, if you want to find out more,
go to our website,
www.visitmymosque.org.
We will charge you for that advertisement later on. Go ahead.
I think there's a number of things that we need to, in a
Solution,
nutshell,
right?
solutions.
Yes, please.
The first solution is that, first of all, we need to, like you were saying, we need to identify within ourselves who we are as a community and what our drawbacks are and how we need to work with each other, including the internalized racism that we have with each other. We need to address that first of all. Secondly, we need to have outreach from a grassroots point of view of being able to tackle external issues that are coming into our community, the Islamophobic issue. And we also need to educate ourselves on how we can best report these issues in order to create a ripple effect of action. For example, with police reporting, I know that majority of my clients would not report stuff because they feel that they are different from the police and that they feel that the police is not there for them as a community.
So how do you change that attitude very quickly?
It comes from, first of all, for example, the police would have to do more outreach work within these communities. You need to go to those communities and talk to them and make them feel like you are one. And vice versa, the community themselves need to be open to such outreach coming to them. So I think that's that. And also education also starts from the home as well. As families, as parents, we need to be talking to our kids about Islamophobia and how they can cope with it and who they need to go to in order to report it. If they're seeing incidents in school, how do they identify it? Who do they speak to? In turn, then if you've got family like governors, parent governors, they need to be involved in their schools in order to tackle these issues.
Thank you.
So it's a two-way process.
Lovely. And then to you, Tasneem?
I think I'll just quote Mark Twain in that, you don't argue with stupid people because they'll bring you down to their level and beat you with experience, really. So there's just some people...
So you're saying do nothing?
No, it's not do nothing. It's just you've got to recognise it's not always worth arguing with some people. They're not... Most of the arguments that are happening are not between people who are actually listening to each other. And I don't believe it's actually about argument. It's just about behaviour. And the sister's right. If we don't act as a body of people, look after each other, look out for each other, and actually explain maybe the people in the shopping mall or something. One of our sisters or brothers is particularly visual to the others as a Muslim, and we don't go and help them and explain to other people this is what it is and they're normal. So if we're not doing that amongst ourselves, then how can we expect to project a unified sort of message of shared values to the other community?
And to you, Tahir?
I had a different answer, but the MCB has changed my mind. So it's, for me, we need...
It's worked. MCB has worked. I can see that. Wonderful.
So it's the example of the Sunnah that the brother mentioned. And for me, it's about more Islam. And it's how the Muslims behaved in Abyssinia when they were in non-Muslim lands, and the etiquette, and the way they behave in those lands. So we need to learn from our own traditions in terms of how to behave in non-Muslim lands.
We've run out of time, but a simple question that remains for the wider community: are you going to be able to accept Muslims for who they are, fully, wholeheartedly, as equal citizens of this country? When you can, you've eradicated Islamophobia in a major way. And for the Muslims, are you going to accept this as your home, wholeheartedly, fully and completely? Are you going to accept British people as your people, wholeheartedly, fully and completely? And are you going to do everything possible for the well-being of the people that you're sharing this island with? When the answer to the last three questions is yes, emphatically yes, you've eradicated Islamophobia, I think it's a two-way process. It's not just one way. I just don't want to blame one community for it. However, Islamophobia is a disease, is a sickness that we need to eradicate, just like we did with our experiences of racism. We did it, and we did it very well. Let's make Islamophobia unfashionable, illegal, and story of yesteryears. Until next time, let me say thanks to my four guests and to yourselves for watching so patiently. Until next time, take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.